The morning sun slowly rose over the peaceful town of Maplewood, a quiet suburb just outside Boston. The streets were calm, and the cool autumn breeze carried the soft scent of fallen leaves. Golden sunlight filtered through tall oak trees in the town park, painting the grass in warm shades of yellow and green. Birds chirped happily, and a gentle wind rustled the leaves. It was the kind of morning that felt calm and beautiful. Yet, for Emily Carter, the world didn't feel beautiful at all. Emily sat silently on a wooden bench in the middle of Maplewood Park. She wore a light green hoodie, and her long dark hair was tied back with a simple headband. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, and her chin rested on her hand. She looked tired. Not physically tired, but emotionally exhausted. Beside her sat her mother, Sarah Carter, a kind woman in her early 40s. Sarah's face carried a gentle warmth, the kind of warmth that only mothers have. She placed her hand softly on Emily's shoulder, trying to comfort her daughter. "Emily," Sarah said softly. But Emily didn't respond. She simply stared at the ground. A few seconds passed. Then Sarah tried again. "Sweetheart, you've been quiet all morning." Emily sighed deeply. "It doesn't matter, Mom." Sarah frowned slightly. "Of course it matters." Emily slowly looked up, her eyes heavy with sadness. "You wouldn't understand." Sarah smiled gently. "Oh honey," she said softly. "I understand more than you think." Emily looked away again. For weeks now, something had been bothering her. Something she had tried to hide from everyone, even from her best friends at school. But hiding pain doesn't make it disappear. It only makes it heavier. Emily's secret. Emily was a 16-year-old high school student at Maplewood High School. To most people, her life looked perfect. She had good grades. She lived in a beautiful town. She had caring parents. But what people didn't see was the pressure she felt every single day. At school, everyone expected her to be perfect. Perfect grades. Perfect future. Perfect life. Her teachers constantly reminded her about college applications. Her classmates competed with each other for top scores. Even social media made things worse. Everywhere she looked, people seemed happier, smarter, and more successful than her. And slowly, Emily started feeling like she was failing. Last week had been the worst. She had received a low score on her math test. For most students, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But for Emily, it felt like the world was collapsing. She had studied all night. She had tried her best. Yet when the teacher returned the tests, the red number on top of the page felt like a knife in her chest. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't perfect. And in Emily's mind, anything less than perfect meant failure. That day, she came home and locked herself in her room. She stopped answering her friends' messages. She barely ate dinner. And she cried. For hours. A mother's concern. Sarah had noticed the change immediately. A mother always does. Emily had become quiet, distant, and sad. She spent more time alone. Her smile had disappeared. So this morning, Sarah decided to do something simple. She took Emily to the park. No lectures. No pressure. Just a peaceful place to talk. Sarah looked at her daughter again. "You know," she said gently, "when I was your age, I thought one bad grade would ruin my entire life." Emily slowly looked at her. "Really?" Sarah chuckled softly. "Oh yes." She leaned back against the bench. "I once failed a chemistry test." Emily blinked. "You failed a test?" Sarah laughed. "Absolutely." Emily looked surprised. "But, you're always telling me to work hard." "And you should," Sarah said kindly. "But working hard doesn't mean you'll always be perfect." Emily stayed silent. Sarah continued. "You know what my father told me that day?" Emily shook her head. "What?" Sarah smiled warmly. "He said, Sarah, life isn't about never falling. It's about learning how to stand back up." Emily slowly absorbed the words. For the first time that morning, her expression softened slightly. But the sadness in her eyes was still there. The stranger on the other bench. Just a few feet away, on another bench, an elderly man sat quietly feeding birds. He wore a brown coat and a flat cap. His white beard moved gently in the wind as pigeons gathered around his feet. His name was Mr. Walter Jenkins. Walter had been coming to this park every morning for the past 10 years. He had seen children grow up. He had seen families laugh. And sometimes, he saw people who were hurting. Like Emily. Walter noticed the conversation between the mother and daughter. He didn't mean to listen. But the sadness in Emily's voice was impossible to ignore. After a few moments, he slowly stood up and walked toward them. "Excuse me," he said politely. Sarah and Emily looked up. The old man smiled kindly. "I'm sorry for interrupting," he said, "but I couldn't help overhearing a little bit." Emily looked slightly embarrassed. Walter chuckled. "Don't worry," he said. "Old people are naturally curious." Sarah smiled politely. Walter looked at Emily and said gently, "You look like someone carrying a very heavy backpack." Emily frowned slightly. "I'm not carrying anything." Walter smiled. "Oh yes you are." He tapped his chest. "Right here." Emily looked confused. Walter sat down on the edge of the bench. "You see," he said, "I spent 40 years as a teacher." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "A teacher?" Walter nodded. "High school math." Emily sighed quietly. "Of course. Math again." Walter noticed her reaction and laughed. "Ah, I see that subject still scares people." Sarah chuckled softly. Walter looked at Emily with gentle eyes. "Let me tell you something," he said. "In 40 years of teaching, I never once met a perfect student." Emily looked up. "Not even one." Walter shook his head. "Not a single one." He leaned forward slightly. "But I met many students who believed they had to be perfect." Emily's eyes slowly softened. Walter continued. "And those students were always the ones who suffered the most." The wind moved through the trees. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Walter smiled kindly. "Young lady," he said, "your story is just beginning." Emily looked at him quietly. Walter's voice was calm but powerful. "One test, one mistake, one bad day." He shook his head gently. "That's not your life." He pointed toward the bright sky above the park. "That's just one page in a very long book." For the first time all morning, Emily smiled. Just a little. But it was real. And in that quiet park, on that simple wooden bench, something inside Emily began to change. The gentle breeze moved through the trees of Maplewood Park as the morning sun slowly climbed higher in the sky. The golden light now covered the wooden benches and the walking path where a few joggers passed by quietly. Emily sat silently, thinking about the old man's words. "That's just one page in a very long book." Those words echoed inside her mind. She had never thought about life that way before. To her, every mistake felt like the end of the world. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. The elderly man, Walter Jenkins, leaned back on the bench and looked up at the sky for a moment. Then he smiled slightly. "You know," he said softly, "you remind me of someone." Emily looked at him curiously. "Who?" Walter chuckled. "Me." Emily raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You?" Walter nodded. "Yes. A very long time ago." Sarah listened quietly, allowing the conversation to unfold. Walter slowly folded his hands together. "When I was 16, he began, I believed my entire future depended on one exam." Emily immediately felt a connection. That sounded exactly like her. Walter continued. "I studied day and night. I barely slept. I didn't meet friends. I didn't enjoy anything." He sighed lightly. "And when the results came." He paused for a moment. "I failed." Emily's eyes widened. "You failed?" Walter nodded calmly. "Yes." He smiled softly. "And I thought my life was over." Emily stared at him. "But, you became a teacher." Walter laughed warmly. "Yes, I did. But that didn't happen right away. The hardest year." Walter looked toward the tall oak trees as if remembering a distant time. "That failure broke my confidence," he said. "For months I felt ashamed. I avoided people. I believed I wasn't smart enough." Emily slowly nodded. That feeling was very familiar. Walter continued. "But one day, something unexpected happened." "What?" Emily asked quietly. Walter smiled. "My teacher visited my house." Emily blinked. "Your teacher came to your house?" "Yes," Walter said. "He sat with my father in the living room. And then he asked to speak with me." Walter leaned forward slightly as he remembered the moment. "I thought he had come to tell my father how disappointed he was." Emily held her breath. "But instead," Walter continued, "he told me something I will never forget." "What did he say?" Emily asked. Walter's eyes shone gently. He said, "Walter, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it." Emily slowly repeated the sentence in her mind. "Failure is part of success." Walter continued. "He told me that the smartest students were not the ones who never made mistakes." He smiled warmly. "They were the ones who learned from them." The leaves rustled above them. The park felt peaceful and quiet. Emily opens her heart. For the first time since they arrived at the park, Emily spoke honestly. I got a low score on my math test, she admitted quietly. Walter nodded as if he had already guessed. And you think that means you're not good enough? Emily looked down. Yes. Walter shook his head gently. Let me ask you something, he said. Did you try your best? Emily thought for a moment. Yes. Did you study? Yes. Walter smiled. Then that test did not show failure. Emily looked confused. It didn't. Walter pointed to her head. No. He tapped his temple lightly. It showed that your brain is still learning. Emily frowned slightly. Walter explained calmly. Every mistake your brain makes is actually helping it grow stronger. Sarah smiled proudly as she listened. Walter continued. Imagine if babies stopped trying to walk the first time they fell. Emily laughed softly. Then nobody would ever learn to walk. Exactly, Walter said. And yet teenagers and adults forget that rule. Emily felt something warm growing inside her chest. Hope. Maybe she had been too hard on herself. A walk through the park. Walter slowly stood up. Come, he said. Let's take a short walk. Emily and Sarah followed him along the park path. The sunlight danced through the leaves as they walked. Children were playing near the swings. A dog chased a tennis ball happily across the grass. Walter pointed toward a small boy who was learning to ride a bicycle. The boy wobbled and then suddenly fell onto the grass. But instead of crying, he stood up again. Walter smiled. See that? Emily nodded. He fell. And what did he do next? Walter asked. He tried again. Walter looked at her kindly. Exactly. Emily realized something. She had treated her mistake like the end of her journey. But maybe it was only the beginning. The hidden pressure. As they continued walking, Emily finally spoke about something she had been hiding. Sometimes I feel like everyone expects too much from me. Sarah looked at her with concern. What do you mean? Emily took a deep breath. At school, everyone talks about college. Perfect grades, perfect careers, perfect lives. She looked down at the ground. And when I see other students doing better than me, I feel like I'm falling behind. Walter listened carefully. Then he smiled gently. Emily, he said, do you know the biggest mistake people make in life? Emily shook her head. What? Walter pointed toward the running track nearby. They run someone else's race. Emily looked puzzled. Walter explained. Life is not a competition with everyone around you. It's a journey where you grow at your own pace. He paused. Some people succeed at 20. Some succeed at 40. Some discover their true passion at 60. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Walter smiled. And all of those lives are equally valuable. Emily felt her shoulders relax slightly. For the first time in weeks. The pressure felt lighter. A new perspective. They returned to the bench where the conversation had started. Walter looked at Emily and said softly. Tell me something. Emily looked up. What? If you could say one thing to yourself 5 years from now, what would it be? Emily thought carefully. Then she answered quietly. I would tell myself not to be so afraid of failing. Walter smiled warmly. That's a very wise answer. He stood up slowly. Well, he said with a gentle laugh, my pigeons are probably wondering where I went. Emily smiled. Thank you for talking to me. Walter tipped his cap politely. My pleasure. Then he said one final sentence before leaving. Remember this, Emily. Your future is much bigger than one test. And with that, Walter Jenkins walked slowly down the path, disappearing between the tall trees. Emily watched him go. She felt different now. The heavy weight she had carried in her heart felt lighter. Sarah wrapped her arm around Emily's